Today, mankind stands at a crossroads, and the path that humanity chooses may have a greater impact on our freedom and prosperity than any event in history. In 2008, a new technology was introduced that is so important that its destiny and the destiny of mankind are inextricably interlinked. It is so powerful that if captured and controlled, it could enslave all of humanity. But if allowed to remain free and flourish, it could foster unimaginable levels of peace and prosperity. It has the power to replace all financial systems globally, to supplant 90% of Wall Street, and to provide some functions of government. It has no agenda. It's always fair and impartial. It cannot be manipulated, subverted, corrupted, or cheated. And it inverts the power structure and places control of one's destiny in the hands of the individual. In the future, when we look back at the 2.6 million year timeline of human development and the major turning points that led to modern civilization, the creation of farming, the domestication of animals, the invention of the wheel, the harnessing of electricity, and the splitting of the atom, the 60-year development of computers, the internet, and this new technology will be looked upon as a single event, a turning point that will change the course of human history. It's called Full Consensus Distributed Ledger Technology, and so far, its major use has been for cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, but its potential goes far, far beyond that.
Hi, I'm here in Washington, D.C. across the street from the Federal Reserve because I'm really excited about something. We could be on the verge of a paradigm shift in currency and trade that could put places like this, the Federal Reserve and other central banks, out of business. In our 4th episode of Hidden Secrets of Money, we called upon the viewers to join a discussion to develop a new world monetary system. And the people that put forth the most logical and compelling arguments were the cryptocurrency and Bitcoin people. So I'm here at a massive Bitcoin conference that has drawn experts from all over the world, and I'm going to be hanging out with them, asking a lot of questions, developing my own opinion. I'd like you to develop yours because this could be something that changes the world.
The most common question I get lately is, when are you going to make an episode of Hidden Secrets of Money about cryptocurrencies? The reason this has taken so long is that I wasn't happy releasing this video until I was comfortable explaining how it works, and now I finally can. As I said in the intro, we're going to start this journey at my first ever Bitcoin conference. This was the first time I'd done a deep dive into researching Bitcoin, and after it finished, I kept on learning and learning some more. And it actually became difficult to finish this episode because of the speed at which this space is evolving. But just a few weeks ago, I learned about something new that could change everything, and I knew we had to get this video out quickly. This really is big. We'll learn more about this latest breakthrough later in the video because in order to explain it, we need to go right back to the beginning and learn how Bitcoin works. Like most people, at first I found the whole thing to be very abstract and complicated, but now I've found a way of breaking it down so that you don't have to be a rocket scientist to get it. I'm going to explain it by using an ancient problem that Bitcoin claims to have solved. It's called the Byzantine General's Problem, and until now, it's been unsolvable. The problem goes like this. How do you make absolutely sure that multiple entities which are separated by distance are in absolute full agreement before an action is taken? In other words, how can individual parties find a way to guarantee full consensus? Here's the example. Imagine that you are a general in the Byzantine army and you're planning to attack an enemy city. You have the city surrounded by several battalions, each of them camped several miles from the other, and each of them led by another general. A coordinated attack on the city from all sides at the same time will be successful, but an uncoordinated attack will likely end in defeat. You have decided to attack at dawn, but you have no walkie-talkies or cell phones, and signals from flags, torches, or smoke could be seen by the enemy. How do you make sure with absolute certainty that all of the other generals reach consensus and all attack together at dawn? You could send messengers on horseback, but what if one of them is captured or killed before delivering the message? You would need to have a reply from each of your generals confirming that they have received your message, which means that they would have to send messengers to you on horseback, but what if they are captured or killed? What if a messenger is captured by the enemy and an imposter messenger with a fake reply is sent back to you? And how do the other generals know that the messages that they received from you are genuine and haven't been intercepted and altered by the enemy? Worse yet, what if some of the other generals are traitors and they send messages back to you confirming that they will attack at dawn when their true intention is to retreat? How can you ever be absolutely certain that all of your battalions will reach consensus and attack simultaneously? Like I said, this problem has remained unsolved for thousands of years, and at its core, it's all about individual parties being able to trust each other directly, no strings attached. Bitcoin claims to have conquered this problem. Now imagine that the battalions are actually computers on a network, and that the generals are copies of a computer program running a ledger. A ledger that, via some very complex math, records transactions and events in the exact order that they happened. The key here is that all of these ledgers are exactly the same for everyone. As soon as a change is made on one copy of a ledger, if it is proven to be true by the math, all other copies of the ledger are updated to match. What we have here is a distributed ledger that is also always in consensus. This is one of the first things to understand about Bitcoin. It is the first full consensus distributed ledger mankind has ever seen. This network can be expanded across the entire planet. It means that individual parties on opposite sides of the world can come to consensus on an event without requiring any third party as an intermediary for trust. Whether it's an order from a general to his troops or an order from you for a pizza, a distributed ledger confirms via math whether an event is true and records it permanently. Bitcoin, the first full consensus distributed ledger, is a trust machine. But is it 100% reliable? That's a question for later in the episode. But for now, where did Bitcoin come from and who invented it?
Well, Bitcoin was originally developed by a pseudonymous developer, Satoshi Nakamoto. There's a lot of speculation about who he is, and frankly, I work directly with him, but I have no idea. But that never really worried me because Bitcoin itself is open source. And so any engineer can evaluate the Bitcoin source code, evaluate the Bitcoin cryptography, and understand and trust the software. So you don't have to trust who wrote it, you trust the software itself. And so that was one of the big reasons why Satoshi chose open source for Bitcoin, is so you can have trust in the system. You don't have to trust who he is.
I don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is. I also don't know who Euclid was. Might have been some dude in Sicily a few years BC, but we don't really know. We have some historical records that tell us that Euclid was someone who invented geometry in the ancient world. But it doesn't matter. Euclidean geometry works whether I know who Euclid is or not, whether Euclid was a nice guy or an evil person Euclidean geometry simply works. It's completely independent of its creator. And if we didn't know who invented the electric motor or the radio or any of these core technology developments, electricity, so what? They still work. You don't have to have any appeal to authority. We don't have to worry about the motives. Now, in a centralized system where someone is in control, it matters who is behind the curtains. It really matters who is in control. It matters who invented it because they remain in control, or they might have a secret way of controlling it. Bitcoin is wide open and no one is in control, and everyone can see exactly how it works.
So how does it work, and what's the point? Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin allow people to transact with each other using the internet anywhere on Earth. Instead of having an account number like a checking account or a credit card, cryptocurrencies are much more secure because they have a public key and a private key. It's like having two account numbers, one for deposits and another for withdrawals. You'll often see them displayed as a string of characters or a scannable code. This level of security means that you could put your public key on a billboard if you wanted to, and your funds would still be secure. The only thing other people can do with your public key is send funds to you. It's your private key that gives you access to your funds. As long as you keep control of your private key, your funds are absolutely safe, and theft and fraud are virtually impossible. But, just like cash in your wallet, you need to keep it safe to prevent it from being stolen. Its security is entirely your responsibility. Cryptocurrencies can also give you privacy. Just like cash, you don't have to disclose any personal information when you spend them. By contrast, a credit card has your name, account number, and expiration date. These act like a public key, but the equivalent of your private key, your signature and security code, are displayed in plain sight. This is just plain stupid. I've toured 5 national money museums, and while I was at one of them, I saw a group of young students on a school outing. I can just imagine that someday in the future, a group of kids will be standing around the credit card display, pointing and laughing at the incredible stupidity of the system we once used. And this is the point. Cryptocurrencies are light years ahead of our current technology. Since Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency, I'm going to use it as our example, and I'll expand on our earlier description of a distributed ledger. But first, where does Bitcoin get its value? Bitcoin is brand new to mankind in that it's both a currency and a payment network simultaneously. And this is where Bitcoin gets its value. The immense network of computers all around the world running the Bitcoin distributed ledger. Every second of every day, these computers are keeping the ledger updated and in full consensus via a system that incentivizes them to process and confirm transactions. The system that Bitcoin runs on is called blockchain. Think of it as a modern version of an old-fashioned bookkeeping ledger, but instead of a handwritten list of entries and calculations, a blockchain is a digital list of entries and calculations. A block is simply a bundle of transactions. Think of a block as a whole page of transactions in the old-fashioned ledger. A blockchain is just a chain of blocks. It's the same as a whole series of pages in the old-fashioned ledger. Easy, huh? Here's how it works. The Bitcoin blockchain actually exists in every one of the millions of computers on the network as exact copies of each other. However, for this example, so that we can zoom in and you can really see just how a blockchain works, I'm going to show it as one giant blockchain in the middle of a small network of computers. Let's follow a pizza transaction with Bitcoin. When the transaction occurs, it first appears on the network in a pool of unconfirmed transactions, along with thousands of others from all around the world. Millions of different computers from the network then gather some of these transactions and place them in their own blocks. The computers are all creating blocks constantly in the hope that theirs will be the next one added to the official chain. A new block is added to the chain every 10 minutes or so when one of the computers wins the right to have its block recognized as the next in the chain and is rewarded with a prize of newly created bitcoins. The way a computer wins the prize is by trying to guess the answer to an extremely difficult math problem. In fact, the problem is so difficult that even with millions of computers making guesses billions or even trillions of times per second, it still takes roughly 10 minutes to find the answer. Once one of the computers guesses the correct answer and wins, all of the millions of computers on the network that did not win are instructed to throw away all the work they have done, update their ledgers with the block from the winning computer, and start again with a new math problem. In doing so, the computers use an immense amount of power and cost a literal fortune to run. So why do they do it? Because it can be very profitable. This is where the term mining for bitcoins comes from. Instead of striking gold by mining for precious metals in the wilderness, these computers are hoping to strike Bitcoin by mining precious numbers on the blockchain. But when these millions of computers are selecting transactions to go into their blocks, they aren't all selecting the same transactions, and not all the blocks are the same size. Some contain more transactions, some contain less. When blocks are thrown away, the transactions they contain go back into the pool of unconfirmed transactions. This means that the probability of a transaction being confirmed and staying in the order it was confirmed in is not absolute, but it becomes more of a certainty every 10 minutes as new blocks are added. In fact, for very large transactions, it's suggested that you wait for 6 or more blocks, about 60 minutes, to be absolutely certain that a payment is permanent. So why is it so slow? Why is your pizza cold before you own it? Interestingly, the system is slowed down on purpose, and here's why. With the insane difficulty of guessing the answer to the math problem, you would think that the odds of 2 or more computers winning at the same time are extremely improbable, but it actually happens quite often. This is called a soft fork, and when it occurs, all the computers in the network receive both of the winning blocks and are instructed to create a new block that will chain to the block they received first. But because of varying internet connection speeds, different computers receive different winning blocks at different times. The tie is broken roughly 10 minutes later when one of the computers solves the new math problem and its block is added to the ledger, and the longest chain wins. But what happens to all of the blocks on the other side of the fork? They're discarded, along with all the transactions they contained, which go back into the pool of unconfirmed transactions. This soft forking is the main reason the system must be slowed down on purpose via the math problem. If the system was instant, it would be forking everywhere, all the time, and there would be no consensus. No one would have any idea of which ledger was the correct one, and every computer would be busy building a different block to create yet another fork. The slowness and immense amount of computing power is required to keep the Bitcoin ledger in full consensus. Therefore, as more and more computing power is added to the network, the system automatically adjusts to increase the difficulty of solving the math problem, which then requires even more power. If Bitcoin is ever going to be widely used, it will be using a massive amount of the world's energy. There are other systems for reaching consensus, but we'll look at those later in the episode. For now, Bitcoin is working as intended and allows people to transact with each other using the internet anywhere on Earth. Bitcoin, it's the first full consensus distributed ledger that mankind has ever seen, but it's not the last.
I'm here at the conference with Eric Grill of Coin Outlet, and I'm going to buy some of my very first Bitcoins right now. And so Eric's going to show me how to do this. He's going to tell me this is a paper wallet.
That's correct.
So I can load this paper currency that's inside this little Ziploc here with Bitcoins. And so I'm going to take a $100 bill and hold that for a second. So what am I supposed to do with this now?
You'll scan your public address into the
In
QR
there?
code, yes.
Okay.
And pull it out when it beeps.
Okay. Okay, it beeped. Awesome.
It'll show your balance.
And okay.
Now you can deposit your money.
And okay. And aha. So I've got 0.1607329 Bitcoins. And I just finished this session.
And now it's sent it and
It's done. And so basically, in the blockchain, the $100 that I just put in gave me that 0.16 something Bitcoins in the blockchain. It's been assigned to my account code. And behind here, I can peel this open, and there's a code that is my private key. That purchasing power is now protected in the blockchain that is mirrored around the world millions of times. So thank you very much, Eric.
Great.
It was
Thank you
great
very much.
meeting you.
Yep.
Wonderful machine and a great advancement forward when it comes to convenience
Yes,
for people.
looking forward to it.
They'll start understanding cryptocurrencies more when they get an exposure that's very similar to an ATM.
That's what we're mirroring. We're
Yes.
trying to- yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
So I've spent a day at the conference now, and I wanted to come and sort of elaborate on some of the things that I've soaked up. And I came here to Washington Circle in Washington, D.C. Behind me is a statue of George Washington. A lot of people don't know this, but you know, the Revolutionary War was a war fought to free themselves from regulation, from government intrusion on their lives, from too much taxation. And the founding fathers were fighting for liberty and freedom. And at the end of the war, George Washington was in control of the armies of this continent and could have crowned himself emperor, but instead chose to resign his commission and retire to private life, giving us this gift of a free republic. One of the things that I'm getting from this conference is that a lot of them are worried about regulation. And so it's this same revolution being fought all over again. They're worried about regulation. They can't actually stop transactions with cryptocurrencies, but they could come and try and punish us afterwards and make it less likely to be used. And this is a tool that could free humanity. It's an amazing leap in technology, an amazing leap in the potential evolution of mankind. And so if this battle is lost and governments do succeed in trying to regulate the cryptocurrencies, it would be like losing the Revolutionary War. This stands for everything that the Founding Fathers stood for: the belief in freedom, liberty, and the individual choice and responsibility for your own actions.
On day 2, I listened to more of the experts, and the more I learned, the more I realized just how much I needed to know. Even once you know all the technical details about Bitcoin, there's still a lot to learn about keeping your funds secure in the real world. One of the most interesting things I found out is in the early days of the internet, they were actually paving the way for something like Bitcoin before they even knew what it would be.
So when the first web browser was built, there was a 404 error, page not found, and there's also a 402 error, payment method not specified. So back when they originally built the web browser, they were thinking about the time when they would eventually discover the technology, create the technology to transfer value over the internet. They didn't have the technology back then, but they still had the foresight that eventually we would get there. Well, now we're here. Bitcoin is a solution to that.
You know, it's hard to isolate what in particular about Bitcoin is so amazing, but if I had to name one thing, I would say it was the distributed network. This is kind of an amazing thing because it's essentially immortal. It can exist, you know, in trillions of copies all over the world. What that means essentially is that it can't be destroyed. I mean, you could apply every regulator, every bureaucrat, every politician, every central banker in the world, assign it to destroy the blockchain, and they could spend, you know, 24/7 doing this, smashing copy after copy after copy, and destroy trillions of copies. But so long as there's one left somewhere, and there always will be, it can reproduce itself instantly and come into existence of billions and trillions of times over again, virtually instantly. What this means is that the blockchain itself is more powerful than all the governments in the world combined many times over. This is huge. We've never had a tool this powerful to beat back the despots of the world.
Throughout most of the convention, I couldn't find anybody that shared a few of the concerns that I have about Bitcoin, such as being a deflationary currency. That was until I met Chris Ellis. Chris, tell me about the concerns that you have.
So, Bitcoin right now is still an experiment, as are most cryptocurrencies, and the price is mostly supported by a speculative sentiment. And that's because markets are forward pricing mechanisms. People are looking at the information and they're buying on the basis of what they believe other people will do in the future with that information. And I think that a lot of people, having spoken to a lot of merchants as well, they are telling me anecdotally that people are not spending their Bitcoins. So I am concerned. I think the economic side of Bitcoin is probably the weakest. That's why we need a lot of these alternative cryptocurrencies to play around with some of the parameters. But we should consider this an experiment for now.
Mm-hmm. One of my concerns is that in a deflation, velocity slows down because your currency is going to be worth more tomorrow than it is today. And so people have a tendency to hoard currency in a deflation, like the Great Depression, for instance. Bitcoin is going to have so many coins per month released, and then that level drops every year or 4 years?
4 years, yeah.
Until it gets to a level where it reaches 21 million coins and it stops.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
When it stops, I have two concerns. One, the Bitcoin mining that people are doing is what encourages them to leave computers running all over the planet, and that's what makes Bitcoin work. Now, I know there's a small transaction fee, and if velocity, the number of transactions, picks up enough, then the transaction fee is a reason to leave your computer on. Mm-hmm. But you have a deflationary currency that encourages hoarding and not spending it on transactions. And so when it reaches the 21 million, what is the reward for leaving the computers running if velocity slows and people tend to hoard it and there's no new coins to be mined anymore? So, and plus, the cost of power is probably going to go up in the future.
Yeah.
Have you got any other concerns?
Yeah, one of my concerns in this space is that most people here are communications and marketing. They're in the business of persuading people. And I think we need more developers. We need to inspire younger people. There are probably fewer than 1,000 people on the planet that actually know how to code a cryptocurrency. And that is a huge form of centralization. They become like Congress. And then we have to kind of go to them as lay people who don't know how to code and ask for changes, or otherwise we end up having to fork the code and produce our own one. So I still think there's a lot to do in terms of outreach, getting existing programmers into the Bitcoin space, onto the GitHub repository, so they can start making their own changes and start experimenting and learning as well.
So what have I learned in the past few days about Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies? I've learned that they're a simple mathematical formula that is fair, honest, and impartial. I've learned that this is more than just a digital currency. I thought that this was just for sending value from one person to another. This is a revolution that will change the world. It will tear down borders. It will connect the globe. It is as important as the internet was. But because it connects people, because it frees people, there will come a day where there is a call to regulate it, to stop it, to shut it down possibly. The people that are calling for those things, their motives need to be questioned, because what they are trying to prevent is freedom. It's that simple. One of the things that cryptocurrency does is it provides freedom, and the people that will be calling for its regulation or its abandonment will be the financial sector, central banks, governments, because it provides for a lot of the things that government does very poorly, it will do very well. That the financial system currently does very poorly, it will do well. It's fair, honest, impartial, instant, and cannot be subverted. The only caveats are that Bitcoin has first mover advantage. It's the largest one, but it may not be the one that succeeds. It's an experiment at this point. But the important thing is that the genie is out of the bottle. Freedom is on its way to us right now. We can all support it, or we can let it languish. and I think that this cannot be stopped. So am I going to sell my gold and silver and convert it all to Bitcoin? Absolutely not. Bitcoin, as I said, is an experiment. There is a possibility that these things could go to zero before they're fully developed. There's a possibility of some sort of catastrophic failure. Right now, it has proved very robust and unhackable. You don't know what is going to happen in the future. So one thing to keep in mind, the Germans came up with the Enigma machine in World War II, and it was supposedly uncrackable, and then we broke the code. And then they added another dial to it to increase the complexity manyfold, and it was supposed to be uncrackable, and we cracked the code. So, Bitcoin has not been completely proven. It's got 5 years of existence now and robustness. This may be the answer to all of mankind's problems when it comes to a simple medium of exchange, but it's more than that. You can make these smart contracts that settle with a set of rules, so somebody doesn't get paid until all of the rules that you have established are fulfilled. You can create escrow with yourself, where there's a third party that has to sign off that a transaction has been completed before the payment goes through. They're working on things where you can take delivery of something continuously and pay for it as you use it. It would be like paying for the internet for every second that you're using it only, or paying for the gas that's delivered to your house. Instead of monthly, you're being billed per thermal unit, and with no frictional costs involved. So this adds up to efficiency. Therefore, mankind is left over with more prosperity. If there's no third party in between bleeding off economic energy, you end up with more prosperity. This is a very good thing for all of us. And because it is so fair and impartial, there's less of a need for the court system. There's less need for government and rules and regulation and people to enforce all of this stuff. In the future, there will be less need for Wall Street. That Wall Street does not realize it yet, but they are antiquated dinosaurs of the past about to go extinct. You can attach stocks and bonds and things such as that to cryptocurrencies, and companies could now do IPOs just on the internet. They do not need Wall Street anymore. They don't need a third party like Goldman Sachs or some other big brokerage house taking a cut. There's no need to worry about corruption because the code cannot be corrupted. I do know that I am going to be putting some of my capital into cryptocurrencies from now on and supporting this movement and helping to push the freedom of mankind forward. And here's something else. The reason that people buy Bitcoin is the same reason that people buy gold and silver. It's an alternative to all of the other currencies, the fiat currencies that are being printed into oblivion on this planet right now, and they eliminate the need for third-party trust. You don't have to trust somebody else with your Bitcoins, you only have to trust yourself. You don't have to trust somebody else with your gold and silver, you have to trust yourself. So the reasons are the same, and so I would encourage every precious metals investor to investigate Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrencies, and I would encourage every Bitcoin and cryptocurrency user and investor to investigate precious metals. I'm going to hold both. I look at the cryptocurrencies as a very speculative, volatile, and potentially risky play. I look at gold and silver just like savings. I see them as something that has never failed in 5,000 years. They are proven, and I see them as extremely undervalued compared to the morass of fiat currencies on this planet at this point. So when I came here, I expected to find nothing but a digital payment system. And what I found is a technology that can revolutionize the planet. If the founding fathers of America were standing here beside me, they would be fighting for this revolution. Hi, this is an action alert for July 11th, 2014. I promised all of the insiders that I'd keep them updated on what I'm doing financially. And recently I've done something quite unusual. Up until now, my portfolio is entirely precious metals, gold and silver, physical. But I've been investigating Bitcoin quite a bit. I was in Washington, D.C. recently at a Bitcoin conference, and I learned a lot about it. I became convinced that this has a tremendous upside potential. The downside potential, it would be short term, and there is a downside risk that it could entirely fail. So I'm not going to put a lot of my portfolio into it, but someday I will probably be up to around 10% of my portfolio going into Bitcoin, believe it or not. The other thing that I'm doing is I'm buying a bunch of Pegasus 1-ounce rounds because they're a bargain, and I recently cut a video about how silver is a game of ounces.
One of the things I didn't get around to during the conference was talking to retailers about their experience of accepting Bitcoin as payment. I'd become interested in accepting Bitcoin at my own business, but I still had some questions, so I made a trip to Salt Lake City to see Patrick Byrne. Now, this is a guy I've really got respect for because he understands monetary history, economics, and the frictional nature of our current monetary system and Wall Street.
So I know that you're in a fairly low profit margin business, being an online retailer of discount goods. I too am in a very low profit margin business. You've been taking Bitcoin. You're one of the first large businesses to adopt Bitcoin.
The first.
The first.
Large business.
Excellent. What is your recommendation for me?
Well, we have publicly, you can look in our public filings, our gross margins are in the high teens, which is quite low for a retailer, and our operating margin is a little over 1%, 1.2%. And of course, to take people's credit cards costs about 2 or 3 or 4% for most businesses. If you start doing sales in Bitcoin and it saves you, say, 3% on your expense, those sales, instead of being 1% net margin, go to 4% net margin. So it's really, especially if you're a tight margin business, it makes a lot of sense to accept Bitcoin and avoid those credit card processing fees. Those credit card companies and that part of the financial industry really has an amazing ability to sit on the exchanges you're making with the public and extract. They're basically extracting the entire profit margin for themselves. And Bitcoin ends that. Cryptocurrency ends that. So
it's a frictionless system.
Frictionless system, but you can, the empire is going to strike back no matter what they're saying. I think the financial industry is quite sorry they didn't do more to put a stop to Bitcoin, kill it in its cradle. Now that it's getting some momentum, they're not able to. That's their entire business model, is to be in that position where they can extract rents through their monopoly or oligopoly. And Bitcoin ends that. So it's really an arrow right at the heart of their business model. If you don't trust the financial system anymore, there's basically 2 ways of checking out. You can buy gold, physical gold and silver, and get it somewhere safe where it can't be taken from you. And the other solution is to get into the crypto revolution.